Dominus Lentis Sonoris Lazari ad monumentum, lacrimatus est horum Deus, et
Last week we reflected upon the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus was drawn by the Spirit into the desert and tempted by Satan. We talked about how we can relate to these temptations and how we can combat our temptations by looking into Scripture just as Jesus did. This week we're going to be looking again at the Gospel of Mark, but a different story. That's the story of the Transfiguration. This can kind of seem like an interesting story at times. It's sort of a wonder and awe type of story. Sometimes it can be difficult to kind of grasp what exactly is going on in this story. Jesus took his three closest disciples, as he often did, Peter, James, and John, up a mountain by themselves, kind of separated themselves. Jesus goes up the mountain and he is seen with Elijah and Moses by his side, the law and the prophets by his side. And you got to think, what were these three disciples thinking when they saw this? They must have been in awe at this. It's very difficult to imagine what this would have been like. Again, this is going back to what we talked about last week, a little bit of the continuity between the Old and New Testaments. Jesus goes up the mountain and is transfigured, and he comes down the mountain and he's just shining with light, with radiant light. You can see this in the Old Testament, again in Exodus, where Moses goes up the mountain and receives the Ten Commandments and comes down the mountain, and it says in Scripture that his face is shining, so radiant that the people encourage him to wear a veil. So you can see there again the continuity between the New and Old Testaments, where Jesus is again fulfilling his role as the new Moses. It's very interesting to see the disciples' reaction, specifically Peter, his reaction to what is happening on the mountain. Whenever he sees Moses and Elijah and he sees Jesus being transfigured, Peter's first reaction is to stay there. He wants to build a tent. And I think the reason is because Peter gets comfortable here. He sees what is good. He even says that it's good that they're there. They should stay there. I'm reminded at this point what St. John Paul the Great told us. He said that we were not made for comfort, but that we were made for greatness. We were not made for comfort, but we were made for greatness. So it's something to think about during this Lenten season, is to not get comfortable like Peter wanted to up on the mountain, but rather go out and get out of our comfort zone and seek out greatness and try to live out what we have been reflecting upon, what we have been learning during this Lenten season.